My name is Alexis Wilson, and I am doing my presentation on Helen Bradford Thompson Woolley. Woolley was a pioneer in educational research and gender psychology, specifically in sex difference studies. She grew up in a childhood household that supported academic desires, and because of her perseverance and hard work within her studies, several opportunities, scholarships, and further research opportunities were granted to her, and she broke down several barriers for future women within the field of psychology. She was born November 6th of 1874 in Englewood, Illinois, to David Wallace Thompson and Isabella Perkins Faxon Thompson. She was the second born of three girls within their family. Her parents encouraged all of the girls to pursue any academic interests that they had. However, her older sister Jane was forced to leave college early due to financial issues at the time. Helen graduated at the top of her class in 1893 from Englewood High School. Because of this, she was asked to give the valedictorian speech, which she titled "The Advance Towards Individual Freedom by the Aid of Invention," which led into her interest of science. Under the impression she was going to be a teacher, she accepted a scholarship to the University of Chicago, and she chose to live at home while furthering her studies to be able to financially afford to do so. Once at the university, she ended up joining the Department of Philosophy, Psychology, and Pedagogy. Her major was in philosophy, but she focused a lot of her studies and courses on neurology and psychology courses. Her junior year, she was offered scholarships in physics and psychology and chose to pursue the psychology scholarship. And she graduated with her undergraduate degree in 1897 and was later given the opportunity for psychology graduate work, supervised by a few of her former professors. In her graduate studies times, she had several papers published in fields of psychology, philosophy, and neurology, and she graduated with high honors in 1900 with her PhD. She was then recognized by the Association of Collegiate Alumni and was given the opportunity to take a European fellowship where she would study under well-known scientists that we know today in Berlin, Germany, and Paris, France. While she was in university, she met her husband-to-be, Paul Gerhardt Woolley. The couple were engaged soon after they met and remained that way for 8 years while finishing professional training. Helen ended up moving to Japan, where Paul was employed after she was done with her fellowship and personal training, and they got married in 1905. Woolley ended up coming back to America when she found out that they were home, or when they were pregnant with the couple's first child, and she gave birth to their daughter Eleanor on August 26, 1907, and they would later have a second daughter named Charlotte, March 5th of 1914. The couple began to grow apart while living in Cincinnati, and they relocated to Detroit in 1921. The couple unfortunately separated in 1924, and Helen chose to relocate for work to New York. However, this transition was really hard on her, as she was used to be surrounded by loved ones, and her daughters were now on their own. She had lost her best friend, and she underwent several medical procedures like a hysterectomy and appendectomy all by herself, and this trauma led to emotional instability, and she was asked to resign from her employment in 1930. She ended up spending her remaining years with her daughter Eleanor in Pennsylvania while her mental health was on a rapid decline, which led to turmoil in many of her relationships. She died in Havertown, Pennsylvania on Christmas Eve of 1947 of an aortic aneurysm. A little bit about her work. Her articles that were published during her graduate years were published in the Journal of Comparative Neurology, Her doctoral dissertation was published in 1903 under the title of Psychological Norms in Men and Women, where she explored thresholds of senses, intellectual abilities, and personality traits. It was believed from the study that women were more emotional, religious, and sensitive, and they were assumed to be less capable of scientific and rational thinking. However, wording in her reports have led people to believe she was cautious of her findings without support necessarily backing up every aspect of them. She later believed differences stemmed from environmental factors opposed to biological ones, and her dissertation was later published as a hardcore edition in 1905. Upon publication, she faced backlash and accusations of using feminist interpretation of the data being presented. There was support, though, that felt like her study could aid in racial difference studies as well, and she ended up giving 2 reviews on the topic of research literature for psychology of sex differences within the Psychological Bulletin. A quote that she gave that a lot of people think was led by her feelings of disapproval from some of her male fellow scientists. She was the director for Mount Holyoke College Psychological Laboratory in Massachusetts upon her undergraduate or her fellowship studies before she moved to the Philippines with Paul. In 1908, they moved back to Cincinnati, Ohio, and she accepted the position of the director within the Vocational Bureau of the Public School System, where they focused primarily on child welfare issues. Within this position, she investigated effects of child labor and influenced changes within the state labor laws. She looked at the mental and physical differences of children in school or those who ended up dropping out of school to pursue work. And it was found that education plays a significant role in increasing IQ of a child. Her work was published in 1926 under the name of An Educational Study of Children at Work and in School between the ages of 14 and 18 years. In 1921, she held the role of president of National Vocational Guidance Association. Within the same year, her family ended up moving, and she joined the staff at Merrill Palmer Institute as a psychologist, where she was able to transition into the position of assistant director later on. Within this role, she was given further opportunity to observe developmental and mental abilities of children. She ended up accepting the position of director of a new Institute of Child Welfare Research at Columbia University in 1924, where she explored early childhood learning, vocational education, and school guidance counseling. The way that she was passionate in her work and had creative approaches to her studies is impactful today, as it was rare for women to be respected and credited for the work in the earlier parts of the 20th century and before. She set a tremendous baseline for further inquiry and work, and we now know that gender roles are not as prevalent as they used to be, and gender and biological sex can be separate but intersect in some aspects. Gender assumptions have also been integrated into cultural and societal viewpoints, and despite equality being far from fully present, Woolley opened doors for women in research and scientific fields. Rebecca Jordan Young is a scientist and gender studies scholar who published the book Brainstorm: The Flaws in the Science of Sex Differences in 2011 that challenged that she said challenges the ideation that sex differences existed within the brain, which aligns with aspects of work and research completed by Woolley over a century ago.